I can't believe I got this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of, well, certainly I think this is probably my favorite picture of birds I've ever taken. And I don't take a lot of pictures of birds, so it wouldn't take much for one to be my favorite. But I was so pleased with how this shot turned out. I did not intend to take this picture at all. And when I got it, I couldn't believe it. This, just like I mentioned the past few weeks, this is one of my cardinal photos, and it's the third in a series. So this is the last one if you're sick of cardinal photos. And this was, again, taken at the same time, same shooting conditions as the previous two. It's the mama and papa cardinal together. But what's interesting about this is, so I was waiting in my backyard for like half an hour. I think more than half an hour, as these cardinals, this pair of cardinals would they would fly around the neighborhood and then fly to this fence, kind of hop around on top of this fence, and then fly to their nest in the tree, which is just out of frame here. You can't really see it. And they would do that one by one. So for a little while, the male would do that little pattern, and I would take some shots of him as he hopped around the fence, and then he would fly away. Then the female would come around and do the same thing. And one time they kind of stopped together, and they were almost never in the same spot at the same time throughout the evening. But one time they came around almost like they were just sort of catching up on their day. And I fired off a couple photos because it was just like less than a second that they were both in the same spot. And I thought, man, if only I could have gotten a shot of those two together. So I thought, what would it take to get a shot of those two together if it happens again? And I knew I needed a slightly wider depth of field for one. So I was shooting all my photos at f2.8, and I stopped it down to f4, which isn't much, but the difference between f2.8 and f4 in a picture like this is pretty big. Even here, that's what I ended up doing here. This is shot at f4, and you can tell, obviously the female is in focus, and I like that she's got her eyes looking out at me, and then behind her, the male is not in focus. And if you look at the fence, he's not that far, but he's out of focus. And that's the difference between, that's depth of field. And if this was f2.8, he would be even more blurry. So it would have been even more dramatic how out of focus he would have been. So I knew that I needed a smaller aperture. I also knew that I needed to be quick on the draw, so to speak, with my focus. So on the D500, it's really good at autofocus and focus tracking and everything like that. But you have to either use subject acquisition, which I didn't want to do, or manually move the focus point, or do some really fast thinking with back button autofocus, and then focus and recompose. So I knew I just had to be on point when it came to the autofocus parameters and getting my focus right. And sure enough, a little while after these two first hopped on the fence, it happened again, and that's what you see here. And I think of the photos that I got, remember I was on continuous high speed. I think maybe 2 turned out, and there was only maybe 5 pictures where they were even on the fence together like this. So this was a really fleeting moment, and I was ready for it because I had prepared in my mind what I was going to do if it happened again. And incidentally, the first time that these two were hanging out on the fence together, I focused on the wrong bird. I focused on the male because he's bright red, and he was also in the background, so it just didn't work. But here I knew that I wanted to focus on whatever bird was in the foreground, which was the female. And I needed a slightly wider depth of field, so f4, and I knew I would just need to take a ton of photos. So I took as many as I could in that short amount of time, which is not many, but all you need is one. And that's what happened here. It came together so well. It looks like these two are just sort of hanging out, having a conversation about their day, maybe talking about what food they got for the kids, that sort of thing. But in reality, they were only here for just a really short amount of time. I don't know, 1 second, 2 seconds, I'm not sure, but it was really short. But it was so cool to capture this moment between this male and female cardinal. And the whole experience was fleeting, not just that one night, the half hour that I spent taking pictures of these birds, but after that, I think it was the very next day, one of they had 2 babies in the nest. I think the very next day, one of their babies was gone. And then I think a day later, both babies were gone. And so both cardinals were gone. And so this is the last in a series for these cardinal photos. This is the third in a series of 3, but it's also one of the last times we even saw these cardinals. So there's a lot going on in this photo. A lot of memories of the quarantine experience, a lot of time with my kids, just a fun photo to take. There's a lot going on here. And I tell you, it was a really cool experience to get the opportunity to take these series of photos. So thank you. Thus concludes my cardinal photos here on Weekly 50, at least for now.